What's up, everybody? Thanks so much for joining us on the Cinema Club podcast. It's been a minute, and I just wanted to get on here before the episode starts and say a huge, massive thank you to everybody who has been so supportive over this last year. It's been a roller coaster in my life the last year, and I kind of had to take a little break from the podcast, but the good news is we are back. I have a lot of plans going forward. It is going to be just a little bit different because life is, of course, crazy and hectic. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of a different format going forward, where we're going to be releasing a episode once a month rather than every other week, just because it fits in with my schedule a little bit better that way. But I want to invite all of you on the podcast like we have been in the past, inviting a different person to choose the movie every month, as well as come on the podcast with me. So if you want to be involved, let me know. Send me a message on Facebook, on our Facebook page. Anybody can join. You can invite your friends, family, whoever loves movies and whoever likes this podcast. So please join. This week's episode is a little bit different. We're going to be doing a 3-part mini-series that is going to be following the new Disney Plus show, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm going to be inviting a fan favorite back, so I will introduce them once we get into the episode. But before we get to that point, I just want to give the spoiler warning. Just to be completely clear, before we get any further, I want to give a huge spoiler warning because we are going to be talking about everything and anything about this show. So if you haven't watched Obi-Wan Kenobi, if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes yet, please do that before listening to this episode. And with that, let's get into it.
They're coming. Stay hidden, or we will not survive.
Leave us alone.
When the time comes, he must be trained.
Like you trained his father? You still want Kenobi. He's gone.
Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. I want every lowlife and bounty hunter to squeeze him. You can't run, Obi-Wan! You can't escape him!
And on this very special episode, I have a couple guests on with me, some very special guests. We have a return of a veteran to the show. It is Chris Amick. He's kind of the person that kind of started this whole idea to do this special episode. So we got to give a big thank you, but just want to introduce Chris to the episode. What's going on, Chris? It's good to have you back on.
Yeah. I was just talking to Nick. It's been like about a year since we did this. We're kind of getting out of COVID now. I got married. A lot of stuff's been happening. As far as the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, I was just texting Nick, the day of this released, and I was like, hey man, like, I know we haven't done the podcast in a long time, but this is something that I feel is gonna be really special. And that would be a great way to return to this kind of format, this platform, and just kind of talk about what we love doing most, watching these movies or films that take us to a galaxy far, far away.
And we also have another very special guest joining us today for the first time on the Cinema Club podcast, and that is Justin Larimore. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you again so much for asking me out on this. This is just a lot of fun. I've never been on a podcast before, but I enjoy talking. I enjoy talking about movies. I enjoy watching them. It's a fun thing. I've been a lifetime Star Wars fan. I remember going to see episode 2 in the movie theaters. So I've, ever since then, just kind of been very close to my heart. So when Kenobi was coming out, I got super excited, and then just wanted to, come on and talk about it. So thanks again for the invite.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll just dive right in. So we're going to go over the synopsis. And again, just want to reiterate, we are spoiling everything about this. So if you have not seen the show, if you have not seen episode 1 and 2 that just released, I would say pause right now and come back when you've watched it, because we are about to get into it. So with that, let's get going. After a lengthy and welcome recap of the prequel trilogy, we start episode 1 of Obi-Wan right on the cusp of Order 66 being ordered. A motley band of Jedi children run away. So this was a huge opening that was a huge surprise and a welcome surprise. I mean, it was great that they started off with a recap of the original 3 episodes of just bringing us and introing us into this world, where we are in the story. And just, I mean, it opens especially just on the brutal opening of Order 66 right as it's starting, right in that Jedi temple with the scene of the younglings. It's just crazy for them to start right there.
Yeah, that's for sure. I was not expecting that at all. I was kind of expecting a very slow start, whatever, like something about Tatooine. But I mean, they just open it up with a bunch of younglings in the temple. They're doing this little class or whatever, and meditation, whatever. And then all of a sudden you just see clones come in and start shooting people. And I gotta say, on one positive note, the action in that scene was fantastic. Just the lightsaber combat,
great.
I mean, it felt so grounded, and it felt very much more like episode 4 or 5, or like some of the Mandalorian kind of stuff they've been doing. But yeah, all in all, I mean, it was just such a hard hitting start to a show that was like, whoa, I was not ready for that at all.
And it kind of like, as you kind of touched on, Nick, that recap of episodes 1, 2, and 3, I thought that was beautifully done. Got us caught up in what was going on right away. But then also, as you were kind of talking about, Justin, like we like immediately jumped into what I appreciated was another perspective of Order 66. And I know we've seen like a lot of different versions in like the animated style, but seeing a live version of this from another perspective was something I really enjoyed as well.
Absolutely. And I did notice there was a detail in rewatching it this morning that I noticed having a little bit more detail with watching episode 1 and 2. I'm not sure if you guys caught it, but if you're looking, the first youngling that we see is a young black girl. I have a huge suspicion that this is Reva, the third sister, because she clearly throughout the rest of the episode has a huge thing against the Jedi, and especially Obi-Wan. And part of that is because Obi-Wan wasn't there, and he arrived late to the Jedi Temple when Order 66 was being taken out. And so I do have a very big suspicion that that may be Reva, and why as we get into the episodes, the future episodes, I think that may be where we're going to go with her story potentially.
I think you're definitely correct.
No, I mean, honestly, I'm glad you guys said that, because I did not catch that at all. I mean, watching this the first time, I was just completely blown away and just wrapped up in that moment. I wasn't looking for those kind of details, and I didn't go back and rewatch it afterwards. But I mean, that's a great catch, because that was kind of my question throughout these first 2 episodes, is why is this character, this Reva, this Inquisitor, like so dead set on capturing the Jedi, so dead set on killing them, on, she just had this like burning hatred for it. And that was my big question and I figured, okay, eventually they're going to answer this. It's just kind of pulling you in, but that makes a lot of sense. And that does bring it back home in a very real way that, here's this character who was there, who had a very different experience in that horrific event, that we're seeing a very different outcome from.
We then jump forward 10 years later on the sand-choked planet of Tatooine. It's not Obi-Wan who touches down in his ship, though. It's a new enemy joined by 2 of his lackeys. These are Inquisitors sent to hunt and kill any remaining Jedi. The Grand Inquisitor is the one in charge, but it's the third sister, Reva, who appears to be our antagonist. Reva is determined to track down Obi-Wan, fed up of hunting minnows and wanting to catch a big fish to present to Darth Vader and gain her position. So I did want to say, just as a background for anybody that doesn't quite know, hasn't gotten into a Clone Wars or any of the other animated series, or even some of the comic books and some of the other material that is in the Star Wars universe. The Inquisitors are a special set of Jedi. They are fallen Jedi who have been trained to serve Darth Vader. And so they are Sith members that have been trained to hunt down the rest of the Jedi. And so a lot of these people may have been former Jedi that were then turned, or even some of them could have been good, but to be able to survive, they embrace the dark side so that they could be able to live instead of being tracked down by the Inquisitors and be executed, as we see what happens to this young Jedi that we are about to be introduced.
For sure. And I mean, the Grand Inquisitor really is first introduced, I think Star Wars Rebels, which the first season, it's similar to Clone Wars. The first season is kind of a kid show, but then after that, it quickly becomes much more of a very serious Star Wars kind of show. But he's the first kind of big antagonist of that show, hunting down Jedi that have run away, or force sensitive children, things of that sort. And honestly, he makes a very menacing villain in that show. I think he's played by Jason Isaacs, or voiced by him, and he just has this very chilling, very cold, calculating kind of characteristic about him. And some of that I think they did very well on this show. They kind of took some of that animated character and then presented it, at least in his persona and his personality and his voice and all that. That seemed to translate pretty well. But yeah, I mean, the Inquisitors, very interesting kind of group of villains. And this is the first time we're seeing them in live action, which is pretty interesting, pretty exciting stuff, at least a little bit on that.
Exactly. And the Grand Inquisitor is so menacing, played by Rupert Friend. And the other person, I mean, we also have Reva, played by Moses Ingram. But the one person that was a huge surprise to me, completely out of left field, is Sung Kang as the fifth brother. Sung Kang, for everybody that doesn't know, is Han from the Fast and the Furious franchise. So it was great to see him, and it was such a surprise. I'm so glad he was in this. And they did a lot of editing to his voice, really brought out that bass that just is so menacing. I just love his character. I want to see more of him, just in particular.
Yeah, and I haven't watched the Rebel series like Justin has. So, and I'm glad you touched on this too, Nick, because I know, as we're kind of getting to know the Inquisitors a little bit more, Reva, we kind of see like she's kind of the lowest of the low on that totem pole. And they say that's, I don't know, they reference it a little bit moving forward, but they're kind of like, hey, that's because of your abilities. So we definitely know that she, probably is that youngling, as we kind of talked about earlier today. But I don't know very much about the lore about, the other Inquisitors, if they were always, Jedi that turned, or if they're, just, working for Darth Vader basically as kill squad, but I think that's really cool that you kind of touched on that. At least some of those people, like Reva, are previous Jedi or younglings that were going to be Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, there's so I had to actually go back and look up some of this just because I was really curious. Apparently, they've done a lot more like Star Wars comics about this kind of stuff.
Oh,
but
cool.
I mean, you take a deep dive into that, you're not going to come out of that rabbit hole. But so the Grand Inquisitor, he started originally he was a Jedi Temple guard. So he actually shows up in the Clone Wars a couple of times, although you don't really see him because they always wear a mask and stuff. But he shows up in a couple of key moments there, and then that's revealed a little bit later in Star Wars Rebels, which is kind of a cool little moment. But yeah, so he was a full-on Jedi Temple guard, and I believe most of the other Inquisitors were either Padawans or like very young Jedi that were either corrupted or tortured or somehow forced into the dark side. So this was an interesting bit that I found. Apparently Palpatine, when he was kind of choosing some of the Inquisitors or choosing some Jedi to kind of make Inquisitors, he was very careful that they not be like super powerful, or that they weren't somebody who had like
Strong the Force too much.
Right. Yeah, they were basically people that he could always keep in check. So they were powerful, but they weren't ever people that would be a threat to him or Darth Vader or things of that sort. And Darth Vader did train them, and apparently trained them like pretty brutally. So there is very much that power struggle amongst that group, which I think is kind of cool that we see that very clearly, very early on. I mean, like you said, Sung Kang, I believe his character is the fifth brother, something of that sort. I mean, he really just like is putting Reva in her place like every chance he can. which is cool to see that. I mean, and this is the dark side. I mean, we've seen this in all kinds of Star Wars stuff. Like they don't work well together.
I mean, we saw the same thing happen with Anakin. I mean, he just went way too far, and that's a place that these Inquisitors have seen happen, is somebody go too far. And so the fifth brother is trying to keep her in check, because I mean, there's a lot of very, very strong similarities between the third sister and Anakin's story, between Reva and Anakin's story already in only just a short amount of time. We can see that she's a very unhinged person who is just obsessed with this need to find and kill Obi-Wan. Well, not kill Obi-Wan, but bring him to Darth Vader, and she has to be kept in check. And that's part of why the Grand Inquisitor isn't letting her take any credit or trying to suppress her, and why she's lower, because they can see that she doesn't have the control that again, the Emperor is looking for in somebody that is going to be high in the ranks there, like you say, Justin. Finally, we are introduced to Obi-Wan. He is living in solitude, keeping to himself and laying low. He sleeps in a cave nearby while working low-paying jobs. Obi-Wan is also keeping an eye on Luke from afar, dropping off supplies, including a toy ship, which we know that Luke was playing with in A New Hope. However, Uncle Owen returns the ship back the next day, telling him to stay away from Luke. On the way back to his cave, Obi-Wan runs into a fellow Jedi named Nari. The Inquisitors are hunting him and he needs help. Obi-Wan encourages him to bury the lightsaber and lay low, moving on with his life.
A lot of stuff, a lot of great stuff. You know, getting to see Obi-Wan again. Like, I know, Justin, as you were kind of referencing at the beginning of the show, we all three of us, honestly, you know, kind of grew up seeing those prequel series, you know, as they were coming out more, because we were younger then. So seeing that iteration of Obi-Wan again for me was really special, and it brought back all those emotions of seeing Star Wars for the first time, I think, for me, because I was talking to Nick about this last week. You know, we have Book of Boba Fett, we have The Mandalorian, of course. I identified more with this Star Wars, I guess. But yeah, then seeing like Obi-Wan, you know, watching over Luke from afar, dropping off that T-16 Skyhopper toy that we see Luke playing with 10 years later on the OG Star Wars. That was, you know, those little tidbits I think were really cool. It wasn't like shoved in our face like, oh, look, cool, this is the same toy that Luke had. You know, it's just like those little Easter eggs, basically. And then, yeah, one other thing I think that happens during this time is that we kind of see, you know, how Obi-Wan's mental state is, right? So, you know, I feel personally that the prequel series kind of glosses over the fact that Qui-Gon Jinn was a mentor and a father figure to Obi-Wan. And what I appreciated in these couple, well, the first episode specifically, is that the series is showcasing and reminding us as an audience that was a very traumatic loss for Obi-Wan. And then on top of, you know, that loss, you know, you have the failure of the Jedi Order / fall of the Republic, the death of Anakin, who he viewed as his brother, loss of Padme. You know, he went to Kamino and was the one who brought it all over those clones. You know, so he has a lot of a lot of stuff that he's like probably not processing very healthily, to be honest. And we're kind of getting to see that. And he's basically resigned himself to the fact that he's no longer a Jedi, but his whole mission is in life, or he's resigned himself to the fact that his mission in life is just to keep an eye on Luke. And I just really enjoyed how this series gave us that perspective on where Obi-Wan is at today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it sad and lonely is like kind of what it looked like. I mean, like watching this was just depressing. I mean, it was like, man, he's going to this like meat processing plant or whatever, just like slicing up meat and going home on his little camel thing. And I mean, I'll be honest, if I wasn't so invested in the character, and Ewan McGregor does such a great job with just in encompassing that and embodying that kind of world weariness. But if I wasn't so invested in the character, I'd be like, this is boring, honestly. But he brings so much rich depth to it. I mean, kind of like you said, like we're really seeing him deal with this series of losses of very heavy, serious stuff. I mean, yeah, he lost Qui-Gon, and we see in this episode, he calls out to Qui-Gon a couple of times, right? And you know, going back to episode 3, Yoda had said like, hey, I have some training for you to like reconnect with your old mentor, with Qui-Gon. And so I think, and this is 10 years later, so he's probably tried. But I would say he probably gave up at some point in time, and you know, maybe he's still trying a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be working. We never see Qui-Gon, we never hear him, nothing like that. But yeah, I mean, and when we see him, he has nightmares about fighting Anakin, on Mustafar, and I mean, he had to basically, in his mind, kill his brother, right? Who had fallen and become a Sith and had like murdered tons of people and all that stuff, and went super dark, right? And he had to kill him, or at least he thought he killed him. And so 10 years later, he's still having nightmares about this. He's still just, dealing with all of this trauma. And yeah, I mean, when we see him interact with this young Jedi Neri, I mean, he's just so blatantly like, hey, I can't help you. I'm not going to help you. Like, you need to give up, walk away, bury your lightsaber out in the sand, and just live a normal life. Like, give up on the Jedi. The Jedi are dead, right? That whole kind of that line was really kind of hurtful. Like, honestly, I was sitting there watching this. I was like, man, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is like my favorite guy in all of Star Wars, and he's doing something very unheroic.
Yet it's so interesting that he's telling Neri to go and bury his lightsaber and just forget about being a Jedi and just put that behind him. Yet he hasn't fully let go. He has not fully let go because he's still living just a short ride from Luke to make sure that he can watch over Luke and make sure that Luke is raised without being brought to the dark side, without being captured by the Sith and all that kind of stuff. So as much as he's like letting go and just telling Neri to let go, he hasn't let go himself and will never let go. So I just thought that juxtaposition was really interesting, and I really liked that they did include another Jedi in the same area as him that was being hunted as well, and then he does find Obi-Wan. I thought this interaction was great, and then so heartbreaking then to see just a couple scenes later where Neri has been captured and it has been killed and is hung up in the town square and everything.
Seriously, yeah, that was kind of. I mean, and again, this whole episode is just gut punch after gut punch, right? I mean, it's just a long, protracted, like, hey, serious stuff has happened, and nobody's dealing with it very well, and this sucks. Like, we're all under the Empire. None of this is good.
Exactly. And that takes us to the next part, which is another day, another job, and Obi-Wan on his way home from work runs into Owen, who tells Obi-Wan to stay away from them and their family. Reva shows up and threatens to kill Owen and his family if no one tells her where the Jedi is. It's touch and go for a while, eventually leading to Reva walking away, promising Owen she'll get him next time.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved seeing the Owen Lars character back in this, and I think he's very strong. He was one of my favorite parts of episode 1.
Exactly. Played by Joel Edgerton.
Yes. And he's basically, excuse my language, but he's like telling like Obi-Wan and the Inquisitors to go fuck themselves. He's like, I might die. I don't give a shit. Obi-Wan, don't be giving toys to Luke. And then with the Inquisitors, he's like, he easily could have given up Obi-Wan, but he's like, I'm probably going to die right now is what he's probably thinking. And he's like, is what it is. He's, and I like that aspect because we can really see that he is very dedicated to keeping Luke alive. And with Obi-Wan, he's not going to betray that trust and that past that they share together as well.
For sure. I mean, yeah, he's such and he was a standout performance in this episode, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah,
you kind of expect like, oh, he's this really crotchety old man, but and I think Joel Edgerton does a great job kind of playing the younger version of who we see in episode 4, right? We only see a couple episodes of Uncle Owen, episode 4 before he's roasted by stormtroopers. But but it's very much the same character. It's very much this guy who's an isolationist. The world outside of his farm doesn't matter to him, right? We see that very much in Joel Edgerton's character, but more fleshed out as far as like we see why he doesn't want to see anything outside of his farm because Anakin Skywalker grew up around there, and then he left and became this great Jedi and saved the world. All of this kind of great stuff, but then became a Sith, right? And wreaked havoc and brought the Empire in. So we see with him, like the outside world has no appeal. There's nothing good out there. So with that kind of thing, I mean, we see why, and we see his kind of resolute, really just endeavor to live on, keep living, keep Luke there, keep him safe, because he is family at the end of the day, but he has very little patience for who he calls Ben Kenobi. Which I've always wondered why Ben. I don't know why that's the name he ever chose. They don't really say that in this. They just kind of have him referred to as Ben. I have no idea. I would like to see that explained a little bit, but that's just me personally. I've always wondered how to get from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Ben Kenobi and keep his last name, and nobody apparently realized it's the same person.
So interestingly, in a twist that nobody saw coming, we also cut across to Alderaan, where we see Leia up to old tricks, mischievously stepping out on important political events to play in the woods. Her whole life has been played out before her, including becoming a senator. For now, it's on to showing her skills in the woods, where she ends up being captured by several goons as they half-heartedly chase her. So this, again, was a twist none of us saw coming. A young Leia who absolutely kills it. She was, like, in my opinion, the best part of the episode and my favorite character so far. An actress, young actress, Vivian Lyra Blair is her name, and she was so good. I mean, an actor this young being that good, getting all the nuances of who Leia is as a character. I mean, she's a feisty little girl who is not going to put up with anybody's crap. And part of my favorite part of this sequence, and I know I just skimmed through a bunch of details there, but was when her cousin was visiting her and she just tells her cousin off for being a bully. Like, I was like, I love this kid.
I mean, she was perfect as a younger, Princess Leia. I mean, she really nailed that very feisty, put up with nothing kind of, especially no scruffy nerf herders. She definitely wasn't. I mean, she was that kind of a kid, and it was great. It was, like you said, it was a huge unexpected twist where I was like, I had no idea that we'd be seeing Alderaan, that we'd be seeing the Organas. Bail Organa was cool to see again. Jimmy Smits came back for that role, and he was always great in the prequels. But then seeing him here, a little bit more fleshed out as this older, more weary Bail Organa and stuff, and I mean, honestly, seeing Alderaan, this is the first time we've seen it for more than just one. We saw it very briefly at the end of episode 3 when Bail Organa took Leia home as a baby. So, we see this like vast sprawling landscape of mountains and snow-capped peaks and whatever. But then we get to actually see Alderaan like a little bit more fully. And that was really neat to me. I just looked, I was like, wow, this is like space Switzerland or something. I mean, this is just great. But that was really neat. And I think that lends a little bit more to eventually, when Alderaan's destroyed by the Death Star in episode 4, it's something that kind of happened, and we see Leia freak out about it for a second, and then that's it. It's like not really talked about at all later on in Star Wars universe. So this makes it mean a little bit more that, like, hey, this like great sprawling paradise of a place, it gets blown up by the Empire, but we get to see Leia kind of grow up in the middle of that, and it explains a lot of how she came to be who she became.
Yeah, and I was just excited that we're finally off Tatooine in one of these Star Wars shows. Saying it's kind of getting old. I mean, I get it's,
it gets everywhere.
Yes, it does.
When we have Star Wars and we have Dune coming out, it's all set in sand. I mean,
it's a lot.
We've gotten a little bit too much sand the last, and a lot of spice. A lot of spice.
It's true.
Oh my God. Yeah, and spice shows up in this show too, but it's like, some kind of crazy street drug or whatever. It shows up Boba Fett. Man, total side note, but I mean, now it's very painfully obvious how much Star Wars kind of stole from Dune, but it's fine. Whatever. It's all good. I'm not mad about it at all.
Yeah, I kind of going back to this, I really enjoyed seeing Alderaan, pre being blown up.
Pre-asteroid field.
Yes, yeah. And then little Leia, like you guys said, that was a super great surprise for me. And I was like, instantly, I was like, wow, this is perfect casting. Like I'm excited to see her, moving forward, hopefully in the series. But I was really like, wow, this is true to the Leia that we grew up seeing. This is just a little mini version of her. It's awesome.
I mean, when you set up a show like this and you are releasing a show like this, in all the trailers that we saw and just all the stuff leading up to finally releasing Obi-Wan Kenobi, we're all thinking in our heads, he's on Tatooine, so obviously this is going to center some way around the story of Luke and him having to protect Luke and all this kind of stuff. And then suddenly it just does a complete left turn, and it's like, nope,
we're not going to really care about Luke here. We're going to let him have his time in 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to focus on Leia for now and for the rest of the season, really, because the actress is billed on IMDb for all 6 episodes. So obviously this is going to be the main story throughout this season. And so just the fact that it was completely a different way than any of the trailers or any of the leaked stuff that came out was going just goes to show what a huge and massive monolith that is the Disney Corp and how secretive they are. And it's just, they did a great job and I commend them for that. And as much as I do love spoilers and I do love kind of seeing where things are going, I do love a huge twist. And I'm just sitting back here like, let's just enjoy this and see where it goes. I'm not going into this with any more preconceived ideas where this show goes. And I just love that.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like a fun little tidbit. I don't know if you guys were already aware of this or not, but one of the bad guys that captures Leia is played by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Vect, yes.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool that they, have him in there for a couple episodes.
Which I just thought was, so I didn't know that at all. I just thought it was like, okay, some kind of bounty hunter character, just a regular sleazeball, right? Kind of character. That's pretty funny though. That does. I mean, that it's kind of points to. I mean, they have some very interesting casting choice. I mean, Sun Kang coming in, like what?
Yeah.
And then her friend and this guy.
I mean, Star Wars is just again proving why they are such a great cameo outlet, because we have so many cameos of people we would never think. I mean, this is one.
Bill Burr in The Mandalorian.
We have Jason Sudeikis in The Mandalorian and a bunch of other people. And then also, I mean, supposedly we had Daniel Craig as one of the stormtroopers.
Oh yeah, that one. That's a funny story because he apparently loves Star Wars and just wanted to be in the movie somehow, some way, and they're like, sure. And it's like, all right, let's be a stormtrooper, and it just doesn't even show his face. You get to hear a few lines of dialogue, and like that's it. It's just
that's
one
awesome.
of those funny things.
So Leia's adoptive parents do speak to Obi-Wan and plead with him to help bring Leia back. They can't get the Senate or anyone else involved, so for now they're a bit stuck. Obi-Wan refuses, pointing out that 10 years have passed and he's not the same man he once was. Bail doesn't take no for an answer and shows up in his cave in person in the next scene to reveal her location. Leia has been taken to Daiyu. It turns out the whole plan was concocted by Reva to draw Obi-Wan out of hiding, and it worked too because he decides to dig up the lightsaber out of the sand and prepares to board his ship to rescue Leia.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the episode just kind of ends on that. That eventually Bail Organa talks him into it, and he's just like, okay, fine. He goes and he uncovers his lightsaber, which has been buried out in some sand dune, which I wondered, how in the world did he find it again? Who knows?
Gotta use the Force, man. Gotta use the Force.
I guess. It's the Force. That's not how the Force works. Who knows, right? They keep rewriting it. Whatever.
Apple tag it.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, and that's how the episode ends. Is him getting on this transport, and he's got his lightsaber with him, and he's just heading off to do who knows what, to go rest, hopefully. And it's a pretty. Yeah, it's a good ending to that episode because, I mean, it was so slow for so much of that episode. And so much of it, I think, was setting the tone for what the story would be and where the characters were, which is all very effectively done. On the other hand, just as an audience, like watching it, it was really, really slow.
If you're not really invested in Star Wars as an entity, yeah, the first one is going to be pretty hard to get through. It is slow. It's setting a lot of exposition, a lot of groundwork as we go forward, but it does pick up, and we're about to get into it. It's going to pick up real quickly in episode 2.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you both kind of thought it was slow because I thought it was perfect pacing, to be honest, because I thought it's perfect pacing because I just really loved getting to see where the Obi-Wan Kenobi character was. And that was just really important to me to kind of not rush into it. Be like, all right, it's been a few years. What's going on with Obi-Wan? But then as you kind of mentioning, Justin, I really liked the specific shot where Obi-Wan's deciding to get on that ship to leave Tatooine. And then we see him walking and we see the little lightsaber on the side. I was like, oh, baby, he's back. Let's go. And I was like, then I got to jump back into, second episode for sure from there. But I was like, that was a cool shot. that was like, okay, Obi-Wan's back.
Let's dive right into episode 2. So Obi-Wan arrives on Dayu. It's a new city. It's a new planet that we haven't been to before in the universe. So it's nice having a new thing to explore and to really dig our hands into. And boy, do we. It's a lawless city seething with criminals. Obi-Wan quickly moves throughout the city in search for Leia before running into a young boy who tells him that a Jedi is in that city who helps everyone who needs his services. The boy takes Obi-Wan to visit Haja Estri, a Jedi who uses his power to help those in need for a price. Obi-Wan, suspicious, calls him out, and it is revealed that his Jedi powers come from a series of fancy remotes and magnets to mimic Force powers. I personally absolutely loved this character, played by Kumail Nanjiani. I mean, it was another, again, cameo that came out totally out of left field. I love him as an actor, but to see him in this role, it was perfect for him, a perfect casting to find this guy who is just using the system and especially using Jedi powers to just make a buck and just completely faking it. Yes, he does actually help people, but of course it is for a price. And it was very funny and gave this episode and this series a little bit of levity, a little bit of break, a little bit of comedic effect here.
Absolutely. And yeah, it needed it. It very much needed it. I mean, we talked, the whole first episode is just so weary and solemn and somber and all these things. And dude, that scene was hilarious. Like I was laughing so much. I was like, this is great. And he nails that part. I mean, he's just this incredibly sketchy, con man trying to play as this Jedi. And it's so painfully obvious to us as an audience. There's that whole opening scene where you see him and this little family. It's like a mom and her kids or something come in there and they're like begging him for help. And he's all super melodramatic about the whole thing and like closing the windows with the Force and, moving around a remote or something. And we see Kenobi like watching this the whole time, and you could see in his face like he's like, this guy's a fraud. And then he comes up and he asks him about it, and and then he exposes him, and this guy's all freaking out about it and whatever. But it was hilarious, and I loved it. Also, I really loved Detective Kenobi. Right, we saw a little bit of him back in episode 2 when he's looking for the Kaminoans and trying to uncover that whole big conspiracy and the clones and whatnot, which is great. And, we see him talk to his buddy Dex at the diner. I mean, Kenobi always knows where to go to find information. And he always knows, you got to go to the really seedy kind of places to figure out all this stuff. I mean, he mentions to this character, he's like, hey, like, what better place to find information on the sewers than a rat? You're a rat, and he's got a hard edge on him, but, he needed it. And that was cool. It was very cool to see Kenobi kind of in take up more of that role again. And that was fun. I always enjoyed seeing that. Just kind of throughout a couple of the other shows that he's shown up in, like Clone Wars and whatnot. But yeah, this was a great scene. It was hilarious. I loved it. And Kenobi just knocked it out with, being who he is and doing what he does, which is just super fun.
Yeah. And something I also want to kind of to mention that I really have been appreciating about this show so far is that I know they're using those volume stages in California to shoot basically all of these Star Wars shows, from my understanding. And what I was enjoying about these first 2 episodes, and I'm sure Nick, you can kind of speak about this a bit maybe more than I can here in videography, but the director, Deborah Chow, really trying to use different lenses, get those wider shots, those different camera angles that really do give us as an audience a better perspective on the world that these characters are going through. Because a lot of, like Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, a lot of those shots are very close up shots because they're limited with those stages. I get that. But I was really enjoying, especially in this second episode, where we get to see a lot of the world on this planet that Obi-Wan is exploring. I think that really helped, at least for me personally, elevate this show visually over basically all the other previous Star Wars shows that we've seen so far.
Well, they've had a few years to really, really perfect this new technology that is the volume. This is technology that is basically video game technology that they can build a world however big that they want to. Yes, they're limited by the size of the volume, but the volume with each show, with each production, has been getting bigger and bigger. and bigger. That LED wall is massive at this point compared to what it was just a couple shows ago in Mandalorian season 1, where they were just trying to figure this thing out. But then not only do they have a bigger volume to work in, they also are just, again, perfecting the technology, the AI based video game sim that is projecting that world and basically building the world as they are filming it, as they are moving around the camera in that space. It changes to get the right parallax, right perspective, all that kind of stuff. And so I think we're just seeing the rapid advancement of this technology that is just completely changing the industry. It isn't just Star Wars that is using the volume now. I mean, we see the volume in Star Trek. It is as perfect as they have been able to come up to this point because they're just learning with every show. And these teams are, because this is the first show in the Star Wars Disney Plus world that is not directed and not produced by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. They are not credited anywhere as producers on this show, which is very surprising to me because they have been at the center of it. Deborah Chow is the person that's pretty much in charge of this whole production, producing it, also directing a lot of the episodes. And I think the amazing thing about this team is the fact that Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni have been able to bring these other directors and give their vision to them as well. It is very consistent. It doesn't feel like it's made by a different team. I mean, it's a little bit more serious than The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, but it's still, it's a rooted universe that feels like it is the same universe that we are used to at this point. And I'm just loving to see not only where they take us in this world, but also just the advancement, like you're saying, in how they are showing this world. It's truly amazing.
I mean, it's immersive. I mean, it's incredibly immersive. I mean, watching this, you're not even thinking about where did they film this or where is this at or how did they do this? You're just like, wow, here it is. Like, here's the world, here's the city. I mean, you see Kenobi walking around through these crowds and, you're sitting there looking and me watching this, I was sitting there thinking like, wow, like this set must be huge or something. But I mean, not even recognizing that, okay, most of this thing is just a screen. Most of what you're seeing is not actually real, but you have no way of knowing that. I mean, it's so well done. And I mean, so yeah, when you see Kenobi walking around and I mean, you can almost smell the marketplace he's in. This little girl like walks up to him, offering him spice and whatever, all this other kind of crazy stuff. And it just feels so real, right? And it feels so gritty and so very rooted and grounded in kind of, the world that it is, right? In this Star Wars world, this Empire period Star Wars, right? Which is, it never really gets away from that fact. I mean, you see stormtroopers all over the place. You see the Inquisitors running around. It's very well done in the sense that it's still very much the same Star Wars, but we're really getting a great picture of it as Imperial era, like Star Wars.
What I love so much about all of these shows, and just in particular, is episode 4, A New Hope, is very campy. I mean, you have these monsters that are super campy. You have these other creatures that it's just like, it's clearly just some head on an actor and everything. And it's very not believable at this point, but and very just.
It was 1979.
But what I love about these shows is it's taking those designs and it's taken those characters and made them real and makes them actually believable that they are real. And they're the same creature design as the original. It's just, it's believable now. You believe that that's not just an actor in a suit. You believe that that's an actual creature that is standing there that they brought from outer space into Hollywood or whatever. It's just, like you say, the world building in this, it's just another level. So despite his nefarious tricks and money grubby scheme, Haja does seem to legitimately want to do good. Haja tells Obi-Wan to look inside of a spice lab. After fighting off 2 random thugs, Obi-Wan finds where Leia is hiding. While his ambush is temporarily successful, Obi-Wan uses a vial of spice to incapacitate the kidnappers and release Leia from the cell where she has been imprisoned. After a rocky start between the two of them, he manages to finally convince Her Highness to follow him away from the Spice Lab and into the streets of Dayu.
I really liked, episode 1, we kind of get to see Obi-Wan. He hasn't been doing anything really combat-wise for a while. And then we jump into episode 2 and he's doing some hand-to-hand combat, and he even he punches somebody. He's like, oh my God, like his hand hurts, which I'm like, okay, cool. Like he's rusty, he's not the Obi-Wan that, was the powerful Jedi that we used to see. Like he's been out of the game for a while, which I really enjoyed seeing that aspect where it wasn't like, oh, Obi-Wan's good to go. He's been out of the game for a hot minute. So I enjoyed seeing that aspect of this for sure.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah, so there's a tension there between, I want Obi-Wan to be this awesome hero again, but on the other hand, I'm also watching this wow, this is a very interesting take on Kenobi that I wasn't, I was kind of expecting, I guess, honestly, but I don't necessarily want to see. I don't want to see an Obi-Wan Kenobi who can't win a fight. I don't necessarily want to see a Kenobi who struggles to use the Force or whatever. I don't. But on the other hand, I for the story, it makes a lot of sense and it works really well. And they do it in such a good job. Because on the other hand, Kenobi's trying to hide the fact that he is a Jedi. So he's just using hhis own normal skills, right? He's just, going in and out, hiding through this spice lab, which, it looks like something out of Breaking Bad, right? He's maneuvering through this thing using all these little subtle tricks and stuff, but they're not anything to do with the Force. It's not anything to do with the lightsaber. He doesn't pull any of that stuff, which I appreciate because it does test him. It does test him very differently, but he also seems to handle that well. And again, this is a 10 years older, 10 years, hopefully wiser Kenobi. So if anything, I mean, with age comes a little bit of experience and comes a little bit of street smarts in that sense. And it was cool seeing that.
It takes us till the end of episode 2, not 1, 2, for us to even see that blue lightsaber come out. And we know Obi-Wan from the Phantom Menace as this master of the lightsaber. He's takes on Darth Maul with Qui-Gon Jinn, but I mean, he can hold his own. I mean, he's a master bladesmith.
However, he is a terrible shot with a blaster.
It's true, but we don't even see him use it. As a fan, it sucks, but it makes sense.
It's frustrating.
It makes sense for where he's at this point. You're right. So as Obi-Wan and Leia are running through the streets, it does not go unnoticed by the Grand Inquisitor, and he arrives on the planet to confront the third sister along with the fifth brother and another yet unidentified Inquisitor. Reva breaks from her team after the Grand Inquisitor tells her to stand down and let him take Obi-Wan himself. The third sister has no such plans, however, and immediately puts out an undisclosed bounty for the capture of Obi-Wan. As Obi-Wan and Leia continue to weave their way through the streets, try not to get caught, Leia is not convinced that Obi-Wan is a Jedi and takes off. So I thought this was a very, very interesting scene when we have the Inquisitors coming down and we have the Grand Inquisitor confronting the third sister, confronting Reva. It's so cool to finally see the tension and that they really do have, and the fact that Reva at this point is taking matters into her own hands. She's been told already a few times on Tatooine to stand down, do not go after Obi-Wan. That is not your mission right now. Just get that out of your mind. And she completely just disregards that and does her own thing. She's set up a huge plan to smoke Obi-Wan out of hiding with this elaborate plan with kidnapping Leia. And then even when she's told to stop at that point, when the Grand Inquisitor finds out, she still is like, I don't care. I'm going to put this bounty out. I'm going to do my thing. And then also, too, the Grand Inquisitor is like, okay, if you're going to do this, fine. I'll take the credit.
Yeah, I mean, this is when the episode really escalates very quickly. Which was cool. I mean, the first half, he's getting to Dayu. He's doing his little investigative work. We have the fun little interaction with Hajj. And then, he's going through the spice lab. He gets late, right? And then the Inquisitors show up, right? And this is, then they're trying to escape. And it's very much they're running for their lives through the streets, through the alleyways. Kenobi has to incapacitate a couple of guys, things like that. Now, I will say that the little scene in the middle of that, where Leia starts kind of thinking about this guy and starts trying to figure out if this rescuer is actually a rescuer or not, and she just becomes convinced that he's not a Jedi. And Yeah, and again, this is just an impetuous 10-year-old girl, just doing what she does. And that was kind of an interesting little scene in the middle there. But then it escalates very quickly out of control when you have all these people shooting at Kenobi, trying to kill him because there's this bounty out. And then he's trying to find Leia the whole time, and she's running away scared. And it just culminates in this really, really cool scene where, she falls off this building, right? And also, Kenobi is using a blaster and he's terrible with it, which is hilarious. Yeah, but she falls off this building and he has to use the Force to like save her, right? And seeing him kind of fight through that, trying to get to that point was really cool. And and then seeing him struggle with that was just showing how far he's gone from using the Force, from being the Jedi that he was. For him, it was a struggle to catch this little girl falling off a building when, we've seen him do all sorts of other incredible things. So it was a really cool sequence, and I enjoyed it a lot. There's a lot of good action.
Yeah, and I also enjoyed kind of getting to know the little Leia character a little bit through this sequence of events as well. Because I think Obi-Wan tells Leia that, she reminds him of someone, which I assume is Padme, because she's always so feisty. And then I also was kind of reflecting on this, after the show a little bit. Leia's very perceptive, both in episode 1 and, during this whole sequence of events about what's going on. She doesn't trust Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan has got a lot of stuff going on inwardly. And I think Leia's perceptiveness and intuitiveness about, in regard to how people feel about her, whether that's her cousin or if it's Obi-Wan, I think that's because of her connection to the Force, slash her Force sensitivity potentially. And I think that really is, kind of being hinted at in some of these sequences. But then, as you were kind of saying, Justin, I also really enjoyed seeing Obi-Wan have to kind of reconnect to the Force that he hasn't been utilizing for so long to save Leia from dying off that building. So yeah, this whole sequence is really cool. The one thing I didn't like was the Reva character. She realizes, oh, Obi-Wan's here, and she like starts to, jump over buildings to get over there, parkour basically herself over there. The one thing that was kind of weird is she uses the Force to knock down this railing, and then she's moving forward, jumping over the building, but she does like a backflip to get onto the other side of the building. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But overall, I really enjoyed like the parkour aspect of that whole sequence.
I like that sequence, but also too, it didn't really pay off. There was no really reason. We didn't actually have her catch up to them at any point, and it didn't go anywhere. She was no closer to them by the end of this sequence than she did when she started.
I think it was just trying to give Reva something to do in that sequence, and trying to give her it was just giving her something to do action wise, to prove that she was capable, or to prove she was, I don't know what. But yeah, I wasn't really that impressed with her either.
So as we already said, Obi-Wan does save a Leia who has miscalculated a jump and falls down, and he uses his Force power to save her from crashing into the ground. They share a heartwarming moment where she finally realizes that he is who he claims to be. They continue to go towards the spaceport that has been cut off by the Imperial garrison. Hadra makes his return and tells Obi-Wan of a rarely used cargo port just a short distance away that is automated and easy to infiltrate. After arriving at the cargo port, Obi-Wan senses the third sister coming and sends Leia on ahead to leave should he not arrive in time. He pulls his lightsaber from his waistband, attempts to evade Reva as she walks around the warehouse section with her red blade ignited. During this game of cat and mouse, she reveals the galaxy-shattering news that Anakin has survived. While this bit of information raises several questions, including how she learned of Vader's closely guarded secrets, it sets Obi-Wan off his game.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it was a cool scene. We get to see a little bit more into the third sister, into her motivations and such. And again, so much of this too is just this crazy, obsessive woman trying to find Kenobi, trying to kill him, trying to find, trying to elevate herself through this task or whatever. But yeah, that was cool. And then seeing her try to goad Kenobi out.
Well, just before that too, I really like to see that little sequence where Haja does keep them away for just a couple seconds to give Obi-Wan and Leia just enough time to get up to the spaceport, get up to the space dock, get up to that ship. He does in the end. It isn't the end of him, thankfully, but we see that he really is at the core a good person, even if he does some pretty seedy things. He's on Dayu. He can't help it. I mean, it's the city that he was probably raised in. It's a city that he grew up as one of the street youths. I mean, he can't help where he came from. He's still a good guy, even if his methods are not the most honorable.
Well, and the line he kind of drops, when he's talking to Kenobi is just hilarious. I mean, he's like, "Do I like money? Yes. Do I feel bad about it? Sometimes." It was funny. He's very honest about who he is and very honest about what he's doing. And but yeah, you're right. At the end of it, he decides to do the right thing and tries to hold off the third sister for a little bit. But I mean, we see her use the Force and just kind of pull the location out of his head and all that. But yeah, Haj I liked him a lot.
So luckily for Obi-Wan, the Grand Inquisitor arrives and confronts Reva yet again. In an unexpected turn of events, not only does Reva not back down, but proceeds to stab the Grand Inquisitor through the chest. This costs her precious time, however, and allows Obi-Wan the time he needs to get to the ship as he grapples with the revelation that Anakin is still alive. The episode ends with the depiction of Vader floating in his bacta tank. So this last scene was insane. It was that again, another twist that did not see coming. I thought the Grand Inquisitor was going to play much of a bigger role than he ends up. I mean, we don't see him die yet, but yeah. And I also really just loved their lightsabers in general. His one that automatically spins is really cool, and hers that has the little guard on it is really cool. And I know that comes from Rebels, but I thought actually seeing it on the screen in live action was really cool.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, Justin, with the head Inquisitor, if he is actually dead, does that kind of retcon the Rebel show? Because the Rebel show takes place after this.
Yeah, so Rebels, the first season of Rebels takes place, I think, shortly before episode 4, or maybe the first 2 seasons are before. But I mean, it's around the time of I don't know. It's a couple years after this show. So the Grand Inquisitor shows up there, and he's alive and well, clearly not dead. So seeing him get stabbed, I was very surprised. One, that Reva would go that far in her mad obsessive quest for Kenobi. But on the other hand, I was like, wait a second, hold on, like he doesn't die here. So I don't think he'll be dead. I mean, we've seen so many characters die and come back or whatever. So the Grand Inquisitor, I would surmise is not dead, definitely injured, and that's going to cause a lot of problems for Reva, I would assume, because now she's probably going to go on the run, hunting for Kenobi, being hunted herself, which I'm kind of curious to see that. But yeah, so the Grand Inquisitor is probably not dead. That would be my guess, because he does show up later on.
Interesting. Okay. And I almost kind of wanted to back up a little bit, kind of touching on when Obi-Wan, realizes that Anakin is alive, and and that Anakin / Darth Vader has sent these Inquisitors to hunt down Jedi. I think that's really well done, because at least me viewing that part, I think when Obi-Wan finds out that Anakin is alive, we can kind of see the conflicted feelings that he has that a little bit internally. He's like, he left his brother for dead, who he thought he killed, who isn't dead. And then he's also realizing that these kids, Leia and Luke, are in much more danger than he probably initially was thinking. But then also maybe Obi-Wan still thinks there may be some good left in Anakin. That's that little clip that Padme talks about, like, oh, there's still good in him. That was, presented in episode 1. So I think, Obi-Wan realizes and has this whole thought process, when Reva tells him that Anakin's Darth Vader, which I know, like, at least in a lot of the books, Darth Vader would kind of kill off anybody that kind of figured that out. So I'm not sure, how Reva knows this, but I definitely understand why it was utilized in this manner in the show. But I just really thought that specific reveal to Obi-Wan was really well done.
Absolutely. And seeing his very visceral reaction to that, I mean, it was one of those things that made me realize, wow, I forgot that Kenobi doesn't know Anakin's alive. And then you see his face, you're like, oh, he has no idea. Like, and it was so real, and it was like, wow, that really brings it home a little bit. Because you see in episode 4 when it's old man Ben Kenobi going up on Darth Vader, like he's very calm, very cool about it. He seems like he already kind of knows what's going on. And he's very well aware that Anakin is Darth Vader and vice versa. But here, I mean, you see it, he has no idea. And again, yeah, I have a huge question on the Reva bit. Like, how in the world does she know that it's Anakin? That presents some problems, unless maybe because Darth Vader trained the Inquisitors, there's somewhat of a closer thing going on there. I don't really know. I also know that Darth Vader doesn't really like the Inquisitors a whole lot. He never really liked them a whole lot. Anyways, but yeah, so with that being said, big questions on that part, but it does pay off a lot in Kenobi's reaction and just really bringing that point home that Darth Vader is very much alive. Anakin is very much alive. And he has no idea. And it really, I mean, it hurts him. It hurts him deeply, which is very cool to see. But I mean, like you said, it was a great point. He starts thinking, you can see in his face, and this is all in a couple of seconds, which just goes to credit. Ewan McGregor is just a phenomenal actor in this. But and a few seconds of unspoken just facial expressions, you can see he's like, wow, like, okay, I was wrong. He's still alive. I've got bigger problems coming down. Like Luke and Leia are in way more danger than I thought possible, and that was very cool to see.
Yeah, I think being able to even like see that little part of this episode, it really, I guess for me, like justified this show being here in the first place. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, do we need an Obi-Wan Kenobi show? After watching these 2 episodes, I'm like, yes, I think this is fantastic and I'm excited for it.
That brings us to the end of episode 2. Episode 3 is coming out the end of this week, and so we got 6 episodes in all for this season, and so a very kind of short season, but a needed season, and I'm so looking forward to. And I just want to hear kind of your guys' final thoughts, and also what you think about the show, what you're excited for.
Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the show. I was enraptured, from moment one. I mean, starting off with such an opening that just really hits you in the gut. And then that until the end, when you see that little glimpse of Anakin Skywalker in the back to tank, you're like, oh my gosh, that was phenomenal. So I'm really excited about the show. I really enjoyed it a lot, especially Ewan McGregor. I mean, he just nails the character. And again, he's always been that perfect actor for that role. It shows in this magnificently. Leia, a very welcome surprise, a lot of fun with that. Was not expecting that, was not expecting to enjoy that after I saw it happen, but she was a standout as well. The character of Hajj was just a treat. His scenes were so much fun. Overall, I liked it a lot. However, my one big gripe about the show is the Inquisitors. I love seeing the Inquisitors. I don't like how they look. And again, coming off of the animated shows like Rebels and Clone Wars and stuff like that, you have so much more freedom in an animated show to do crazy things with, what they look like and aliens and all this kind of stuff. But they just didn't translate that over into the live action. It just kind of seems a little bit more bland. They don't really look quite right. It kind of looks odd and off just a little bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of them. And hopefully they can kind of work out some of those kinks and do something better with it. And that's purely aesthetic. The characteristics of them are perfect. All of that stuff is great. But yeah, all in all, thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm very much looking forward to the rest of this season.
Yeah, and with Inquisitors, I haven't watched the Rebel show, but I really enjoyed, seeing those characters. And I'm just hoping that we get to dive into them as characters a little bit more, because I feel like we kind of got the glossed over version in this show. But overall, super happy with these first 2 episodes. Especially episode 1 was my favorite out of the 2, to be honest with you guys. I really am enjoying this show. I'm really glad we're doing this podcast, covering these episodes. And with the big reveal at the end of Darth Vader, I'm super excited. I don't know when he's going to pop up here, hopefully next 2 episodes or so. But I'm really excited to actually get to see Darth Vader back on the screen. So that's where I'm kind of at with my thoughts right now.
Absolutely. I am so excited for this show. This is a show that I personally didn't see coming. And I will say the thing that I love most about this show is that I don't see things coming. There are so many twists and turns that have happened already in only 2 episodes. And I'm so here for it. I'm so excited to see where the show goes. I mean, it really is a big character study into Obi-Wan Kenobi, to see what all this trauma that has happened to him in the past is going to do here, and how it translates into how he interacts and how he protects Leia and Luke too. And I'm just really excited to see where the show takes just specifically him as a character. I think that Ewan McGregor is, again, knocking it out of the park. I think the casting and the cameos are absolutely amazing. amazing, and also too, world building is amazing. The visuals are just stunning. I think Deborah Chow has done an amazing job here in crafting a team and a cast that is doing this show and doing this character the justice that he deserves. And I'm just excited to see where we go next. Excited to see the next episode that comes out Wednesday, and then also to come back on here and do this again to our listeners. We are going to be having Chris and Justin back so that we can just keep this ball rolling. We can have more fun talking about this, diving deep into this. So stay tuned as we go into the next episode, the next 2 episodes. And again, if you don't have Disney Plus, get Disney Plus. If you want to follow along with us, watch along with us, we'll be back in a couple more weeks with the next episode. So just stay tuned for that. And thank you again, guys, for being a part of this first episode, this special series that we're doing something a little bit different. We're back. I'm not sure how long we'll be back. I mean, this was something that Chris has been really prodding at me to get going again for a while. I have other people. And thank you so much to everybody who's been just supportive of me in this break, and then also by saying and encouraging me to come back to do this again. I really want to keep this going. So
join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC. And as always, listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else that you find your podcast. We have moved over to Anchor rather than Podbean anymore. So if you can't find us, that's why. So we're over there now. It's an awesome platform. Anchor is awesome, and we're going to be there from now on. And if you want to be on a future podcast, please message me on Facebook, and I would love to get you on the podcast as either a guest or my co-host picking the movie of the month. And finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. It's going to be really helpful for us to reach more listeners, not just our friends and family, and get even more members to this club so that we have a community of people that just are talking about movies. So thanks again. Have a great one, and we'll see you next week for episodes 3 and 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi.